Some of the most wealthy people I know have always said this, but I never thought what they said really mattered. The honest truth is, if you don't understand bond, you never understand how money works. There's a market worth around $1 trillion you probably never heard about. It affects your mortgage, your investments, your job, and the price of crypto if you really care about that. What's so interesting, only the 0.01% of extremely wealthy people know about this. It's called the bond market, which is the most important piece of the global financial system. So the first question is, what is a bond? A bond is basically, if you're an entrepreneur, which majority of you watching these videos are, you have an incredible idea, but you don't have the money to bring this company to life. You have a borrower and a lender. However, the borrower actually promised the lender not only will you pay them back, but you pay them back with interest, which is basically a little bit on top of what you've borrowed. Not only do us entrepreneurs borrow money, but the government borrows money. The only difference is when the government or some companies offer money, they do it via bonds. So the government becomes the borrower while the investors become the lender. The only difference to a company is the government borrow in a larger scale. They borrow for healthcare, for the military, for construction as well. The main reason for this is when the government borrow money, it's mainly to create more jobs and to incentivize citizens to be a lot more productive. Long story short, you probably know is that the more productive the citizens are, the more they will contribute towards the tax. You do want a working nation, so then they will pay tax, which then goes back into the government. If you look at any graph for the UK or for the US, majority of its revenue is actually from income tax. Majority. Obviously, there's other sectors like companies tax, capital tax, but a large proportion of the revenue is actually from income tax. Under 11% comes from non-taxes. But if you ever study the news or economics, you know the government spends a lot more than what it brings home. And the difference between the income and the outcome of the government spend is called budget deficit. And every time the government spends more than what it collects, this increases government debt. As you probably know, what's the statistics in America? America is basically paying $1 trillion every year on interest. That's a crazy fact. How's the government spending $1 trillion on just interest? These are crazy numbers. We all know last week Elon Musk became the first trillionaire. That took him years to do. The government's doing that every year. Spending. It's crazy. As of last year, the total UK's national debt is 2.7 trillion. That is absolutely crazy. While America's around 37 trillion. So all of this money, like 32 trillion or 2.7 trillion, it all came from an investor. What happens is the treasury basically do like an auction and they place the price of different bonds and different investors can pick. Most of these bonds are mainly bought like the Chinese bank, the Swedish insurance company, the Irish pension fund, or even like South Africa government. All of these are a different class of investors. And of course, regular people. So why do investors buy bonds in the first place? Because US bonds are known to be one of the safest options of investing. More safe than the S&P 500. One may say. If the US or the were ever to default on debt, basically meaning not paying back and going bankrupt, not to be a troll or a doomer, the global economy could literally crash. Like properly crash. Worse than the 2008 financial crash. Some of the terminology used when discussing about bonds are principal, which is the amount being invested or the amount being borrowed. Basically how much the bond is. The coupon, which is known as the interest payment. This is more or less the annual interest on each bond or how much one may have to pay back based on a bond, or the other way around if you're the borrower. The maturity, which is how long your investment is for, or when the lender expect to get their money back. The yield is basically the interest the investors get from the bond. The yield and coupon is different because the coupon is a fixed interest rate, while the yield can actually fluctuate and change as the price of the bond increases. So if the price of the bond falls, the yield rises, and if the price of the bond increases, the yield decreases. So the government basically sells these bonds by the treasury at a set date, either weekly, yearly, or monthly. This all depends on the maturity of the bond. And the yield obviously depends on how demanding the specific bond is. This is known as the primary market. When new treasury bonds are sold in the primary market, the yield at which they're sold becomes the benchmark. Then you have investors in the secondary market. They will look at this price and reassess the value at a similar bond which is already circulating. Investors are constantly buying or selling bonds in the secondary market. They basically are just guessing or doing some calculations if the rates are going to go up or down, and they're making loads of money from this. They also look at if the economy is going to speed up or slow down, if inflation is going to go up or down, if there's going to be a war, if there's going to be a crash. They look at all of these factors. In a nutshell, market interest rates are really just a yield that global bond investors are demanding at the current time. If the market goes up, the cost of borrowing goes up, and the interest on debt goes up. So everything always goes up, or it can all go down. They all work together. This is why we gave that figure of the US has a 37 trillion debt, according to the numbers of 2025. But they still have to pay that interest, which is around 1 trillion a year. Crazy. I know, absolutely crazy. Right now, a lot of government debt are in short-term treasury bills. This varies between 6 to 18 months. Anything longer, what you call long-term treasury bills. And this is why the government are constantly using these treasury bills, 6 months, 18 months, 12 months, to roll over the debt. More of the debt will go up, which means majority of the GDP of the company have to be used to pay this debt and the interest as well. But the issue with America and the UK right now, we just keep borrowing more and more and more. So when we're actually going to pay off our interest on our debt, let alone our actual debt, they're basically using debts to pay off the debt, which is compounding the negative effects in the future. So you're basically asking, how does this affect the stock market? We all care about investing. Even though I have a community called Wellington, it's full of like-minded entrepreneurs in London where we deal $10 million problems collectively. You don't want to take these decisions by yourself, especially if they can change the trajectory of your business and your financial well-being. It's for like-minded people. If you'd like to join this community, click the link in the description and apply. Yes, I said apply because we don't let anyone come in. It's very vetted and a real created ecosystem. So this is why a stock is more risky, because the stock is an individual company, while any company, even Apple, even Amazon, no matter how big they are, they can end up going to zero. However, the government cannot go into zero. A whole nation's economy, GDP, cannot go to zero. It can, but so highly unlikely. This is why they're more safe to invest in bonds rather than the stock market. These are the majority of the millionaires, billionaires I know or I speak to. They'll have a portion of their investment in bonds, because bonds is more likely to go up and less likely to crash in comparison to stock market. YouTube algorithm is extremely good. Any video they recommend you suggest here, I will also recommend you to click.